Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about episodes 5 and 6 of Daredevil Born Again, which is both dropped simultaneously here on Disney+. And I have a lot of reasons as to why I think that they did drop both these episodes here at the same time when it comes to, the rework that this show had, which I'll get into because we essentially have two polar opposite episodes. We have one episode that feels like it was the old guard and another episode that feels like it is the reworked version of this show. And I actually think both of them work in extremely different reasons, which I don't think is what most people are going to have as a takeaway after watching these two episodes. So of course I will be getting to spoilers for episodes 5 and 6 of this show, and if you haven't watched it, I do think that this show has been a great revival series of the original Daredevil show that fans like me have been waiting for literal years, and so I cannot wait to get into this episode. So like I said, we're going to be talking about spoilers, so let's just jump right into it. So we're going to go ahead and start off by talking about episode 6. Actually, we're going to skip episode 5 for now because I think that has to do with more of the rework and the behind the scenes stuff, which I'll get into here in a bit. But episode 6, I think that technically, if you're from the future and you're able to binge this whole thing and somebody told you that you can skip episode 5 entirely and just jump straight into 6, I think you can technically do so because this episode does pick up more so off the events of episode 4 than it does episode 5. If you watch my last video, you know that I actually had some issues structurally with the show, especially in episode 4. I didn't necessarily dislike episode 4. I like the individual elements within that episode. I love the stuff with Angela Ayelet at the beginning of the episode. I love the stuff with Punisher at the end of the episode. But my main concern in that video was saying that essentially, I think the transition from the Hector Ayala, White Tiger stuff to the Muse stuff felt a little bit messy because I didn't see how those two storylines could possibly be connected. I didn't think that some of these characters would come back and have another scene. And I'm glad to be wrong with that because this episode does start off once again with Angela Ayala going up to Matt Murdock because he's essentially the only one that she can trust with this information. She can't go to the cops because she believes, rightfully so, that the cops are the one who killed her uncle. And she has the exact same drive that he had, this drive to not sit around and do nothing when she can tell that the little guy is being screwed over because, the police force at large are not looking out for these people because she knows and that her uncle knows that people have been going missing inside of this city. Nobody's really paying attention to it, and that's why you need people like the White Tiger, like Daredevil, to focus on those people. And we know that the character of Muse is actually going to be the one who's kidnapping all these people, and that is the guy that White Tiger was tracking down this entire time, and he got caught up with all the court cases, and it just kind of, again, went underneath the radar because now you have this whole media circus that's been going around the city rather than the actual problems at hand. And I really love this because, again, it does bridge the gap between these two storylines that I thought was kind of missing inside of that last episode, and it just makes a lot of sense. And as I've been saying in every single one of the videos, I really love how they've been handling the character arc of Matt Murdock, trying to get himself back inside of that costume because of the pain he feels and the guilt he feels about wearing it, about, possibly crossing that line of killing people and going into that moral gray area that the Punisher has been living in this entire time. And so I really love the character arc. I thought him putting on the costume at the end of the episode felt incredibly earned, if not a little bit choppy with one editing choice with him opening the door to his room of all the costumes and just cutting him to him wearing it. I honestly kind of wish they did the whole cheesy suit up scene that you get to see in a lot of these different comic book movies, even though it would have came off as a little bit cheesy and a little bit, silly. I don't care. It's one of those things that just felt like it would be earned at this point in the stage because we've gotten 6 episodes into the series and he's finally getting it back on, and it was awesome. But I just wish we got that cheesy little montage scene. And of course, Matt is going after the Muse character, who I think the show is handling extremely well. This guy is absolutely terrifying. The way that his character is designed, the look of the mask, the way that he's getting his 60 plus victims, which is a lot more victims than I thought this character would have at this point, but he's taking all his victims, draining them of their blood, and using it to paint his murals. It is so incredibly disturbing. And even the way that FISK learns about this and how everybody is so mortified by this because this one guy, he's trying to clean it and he's trying to figure out what material or what substance they use for this painting to be able to clean it off, and he sees that it's blood and he kind of rambles on for way too long to just, tell FISK about that. It adds a little bit of dark humor to all of this as well, which I think the show is also handling really well. But everything with this character and everything with the way that everybody is kind of discovering who he is with, White Tiger and Angela Ayala, going after him. And then also you have the cop side of things and FISK learning about it and him creating the vigilante task force because of it. I think that all of this is leading up to quite the final 3 episodes. And the FISK stuff is another thing that I feel like has been kind of off on the side, and I've been waiting for it to converge into our story thus far. And I think similarly to how they're handling with Matt Murdock's, decision to get back into the mask, I think they've been kind of doing the same thing with Wilson Fisk of, having this facade of being this politician, of, you know, trying to be this guy that is doing things for the city, but we know that is not what he is doing. We know that the whole thing with the port is for him to, you know, put money in his pockets and to create his, you know, criminal empire in a more legal and more front-facing sense, that he can kind of get away with things, because we know that politicians in a lot of ways are untouchable, especially somebody like FISK, somebody who is, you know, gathering all these people that are extremely loyal to him and will not, you know, get rid of them, because they know that loyalty is the most important thing inside of his administration. And it's a terrifying thing to show, because that's exactly what's happening in our real world as well. But we of course know that FISK cannot help, but his biggest flaw is that he can't help but to smash people's faces in every single time he gets a chance. And he's been holding Adam hostage essentially in his basement for a very long time in this dungeon, and he just snaps at this point of the series. He cannot take it anymore. He needs to go down. He throws him an axe onto the ground and basically says that when he was a boy, when he was going up against people that were 3 times his size, a good weapon was a good way to equalize the battlefield. And he gives this guy a weapon, and they just go at it at the same time that Matt is going after Muse. And the cutting between these two sequences of them both going back to their old ways, Matt inside the Daredevil costume and FISK going after, you know, crushing a guy's skull, and it was great. I think that the action was really great. I think the hand-to-hand combat was fantastic. I think the new element of this show and how Daredevil has been using his retractable weapons inside of the fight scenes is really fun and really great to see. He almost also hangs Muse at the end of the episode, and the only reason why he stops is because he decides to save Angela over stopping the bad guy, which I think is a very integral part of his character. He's rather than, you know, going after the criminal, he'd rather save the person's life, which I think is an essential thing for a hero to have, all while FISK is smashing Adam's face in with absolutely no hesitation, and it is completely brutal. And so where do we go from here? Well, we have the anti-vigilante task force, which has essentially been tasked out to go ahead and do whatever they want. Essentially, they can get away with any sort of, you know, violent force to be able to get the adversaries of Wilson Fisk, which is absolutely terrifying. Whether doing good like Daredevil or bad like Muse, all of you are on the same playing field, and this task force is going to go after you, because we know that these, you know, dirty and corrupt cops are going to be willing to go the extra mile to just do the worst things possible, which is absolutely terrifying to see. And I think that there was a shot of the Punisher inside of the mid-season trailer that I thought that the only scene with the Punisher was going to be in that last episode, but if we get more Punisher inside of this series with him going up against these cops that are, you know, donning his symbol essentially to do things that he wouldn't, you know, be okay with doing, which is weird to say because that is also a very morally gray character. I cannot wait to see how that character also comes back into play, because I think that all 4 of these storylines are coming to a head in these last 3 episodes, and I'm very curious to see how it'll all pan out. But let's of course not forget about episode 5 of the series, because like I said, I think technically you could skip it. It is a bottle episode that doesn't have any real bearing on the larger plot at hand. And, you know, if you were to, you know, play this show out and you released 1 episode a week and you just had this episode play out this week without episode 6 being paired with it, I think everybody would collectively lose their absolute minds, like they did with Severance, with episode 8 of that show having a bottle episode with a character that wasn't directly tied with the direct plot of that series. Although I think that episode did still have a lot of great reveals and still was extremely necessary for that show. Check out my review for Severance, which I did really like that episode and that series in general. Easily the best show on television. But when it comes to this episode, it did feel even more disconnected from the larger story at hand. It just starred Matt Murdock trying to stop a bank robbery with the guy from Miss Marvel. But with all that being said, I do think that this is a really interesting window into seeing what the show used to be before the rework. And honestly, I don't mind it. I think that this episode is actually extremely well paced. I like the direction. I think as a standalone episode of Matt Murdock doing his thing inside of a bank, trying to stop these hostages from getting hurt, trying to stop the bad guys from getting away, and trying to stop the cops from, you know, barging in to possibly have collateral damage with all these characters all at the same time, is a really fun thing to see. I think that Matt Murdock as a character and Charlie Cox as an actor is very versatile. He can be in the really messed up dark stuff. He can do a lot of great, you know, ideological battles and conversations between him and Punisher. He can do that stuff extremely well. He can go up against Muse in a very bloody and dark and messed up fight scene at the end of episode 6, but he can also bounce off of Yusuf Khan very well in a very comedic episode in which Irish robbers are robbing a bank on St. Patrick's Day. Like, this episode conceptually is a little bit silly, but I do think that it is well made. It's well scripted. I think the tension within this actual episode is pretty solid in and of itself, and I think that as a proof of concept for the character of Daredevil, I think it works really well as just an episode you can show some random person and be like, this is who Daredevil is. He's a lawyer by day, but, you know, if a bank robbery happens, he can't help but to try to save these people and try to stop these bank robbers in the way that only he could, by listening to every conversation, by listening to what the cops are doing outside of the bank, while also listening to what the bank robbers are saying inside of the bank, while also, you know, listening off to Yusuf Khan to make sure that he is okay when he's going down to open the safe safe when he doesn't have the actual combination to open said safe. There's a lot of fun elements inside of the show that uses, Daredevil's abilities in ways that, we wouldn't have seen inside of that original show, back on Netflix. And so it's a weird balance where we get an episode that is nothing like the other episodes that we've had so far in this series so far, but it also is nice to see. It's a nice change of pace. It's kind of a nice breath of fresh air when it comes to the darkness that we got inside of episode 6. Again, it is the complete opposite tonally to that episode that I honestly kind of enjoyed.
A blind solicitor and hold for it, an orphan? Are you bloody serious? You're like a regular wee Charles Dickens character, aren't you?
And because they dropped both of these episodes at the same time, instead of it feeling like a throwaway filler episode, it felt like a bonus episode, a nice little treat to give the audience for today by giving them 2 episodes at once. And so I think that Marvel and Disney played it off extremely well. Even though they had this filler episode, they probably didn't want to scrap it entirely because, they had contracts with certain people, they had contracts with these directors, and they had this episode that they were really proud of, that they really enjoyed. Why not release it at the same time? And so this is a very weird grouping of 2 episodes, a little 1-2 punch of just like a very comedic episode to a very dark and twisted episode right after that. It's, this crazy whiplash that we get to see inside of this show. And I think if you were to binge it, maybe it'll really mess with the momentum, like Severance also had a bit of momentum, just kind of being messed up by that bottle episode as well. And so I'm very curious to see how audiences are going to react to this, but I still had a lot of fun watching both of these episodes here tonight. And so I'm going to pass it off to you guys. What did you think of these 2 episodes here of Daredevil Born Again, dropped both simultaneously on Disney Plus? Did you like the lighter episode as well as the darker episode? I actually like them both for very different reasons, but I'm very curious to hear what you thought in the comment section down below. I do believe that the episode 7 that we get next week is directed by the same guy who did episode 6, so I'm expecting a nice continuation of the Muse storyline before, Benson and Moorhead kind of take over for the last 2 episodes, who are the new directors of the series and the new, showrunners of the series, along with, I believe, the showrunner of the Punisher series. So I think that's, after this point, I think it's going to be smooth sailing from here, because I do think that we've had some tonal inconsistencies and some pacing inconsistencies because the series was crammed into 9 episodes rather than the 18 episodes they were originally doing for the show before the rework. And so a lot of interesting stuff that are happening here on this show, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts of it in the comment section down below. And of course, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. I just talked about Severance here on the channel, which again is a must-watch show, and again, weekly reviews out for Daredevil Born Again, along with a review for Death of a Unicorn later on this weekend, which I'm very excited to see that movie and talk about it here on the channel as well. So thanks everybody for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one.